Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate, with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to another episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, our guest is Kevin Bupp. Kevin, he does two podcasts. What's it called? Investing in Real Estate for Cash Flow, and what's the other one? Mobile Home Park something?
Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow, and then the Mobile Home Park Investing Podcast. There you go.
You
were close.
That was close. You run a Mobile Home Park Academy. I'm just winging it all, so it's coming off the top of my head, and I'm not feeling the best. Like I said, thank you for coming on the show. Is there anything else I should ask you? Like, what else do you do? What else am I missing on? I know you do a lot of philanthropy as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just a normal guy, man. I invest in real estate full time and have been for nearly 20 years now. And I'm involved in a lot of different charitable endeavors, and I've got some hobbies that revolve around giving back. I do a big bike ride every year where we raise a bunch of money, a road bike ride, raise a bunch of money, give back to charities, feed thousands of families during the holidays. But I mean, really, at the end of the day, man, I'm just a normal guy, just like you, Glenn. So I just I've found my feeling in the world as a real estate investor. Yeah,
and your niche is the mobile home park part of that. So first thing I'm going to ask you is why mobile home parks? Why did you choose that niche?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I chose it. It kind of chose me, and that's not the only thing I've done. In the start of my career, I was buying lots of single-family residential homes, fixing and flipping, and fixing and holding. More importantly, that was kind of always my business plan was buy, fix, and keep and rent. Yeah. And I did flip when I needed to, but ultimately my long-term goal was always to create cash flow. And that started by investing in single-family properties, moved on to apartment complexes. I've owned numerous different types of commercial real estate over the years, everything from retail to office to, tracts of land. I'm sure I'm missing something there, but in any event, I've owned a good bit of everything and fell into mobile home parks I guess it's been about 7 years now, and just really was introduced to a guy that was in the space by a mutual friend. Had lunch with this gentleman, not really interested in his business and what he did. He just happened to be a mobile home park investor, and had lunch with him, and we got to talking. He piqued my interest in many different ways, and I decided that I had to give it a shot, and I went and bought a park within that first year of meeting with him, and then I bought another one, and I bought another one, and now today we're in 13 states, and this is what we do day in, day out.
So yeah, I guess you're in all these different things. I guess the closest comparison would be the multifamily buildings. So what's the difference between from going from multifamily into the mobile home parks?
Yeah, I mean, there's a litany of differences. I mean, I'll speak to it maybe from what I see to be as the benefits, because again, I've owned apartment complexes. I like that business model very much, yep. But I do choose to focus on mobile home parks today. So a couple of the big reasons is there's a massive barrier to entry in our space. Mobile home parks are the only asset class that have a diminishing supply, meaning that there are more that are being torn down, shut down, or redeveloped than that are being built, new supply coming onto the market. So that creates a massive barrier to entry in that municipalities don't want these things. And a lot of the parks are in locations that have higher and better uses. And so the chance of ever getting approval to actually get a new park built is slim to none, basically. And so that means when we buy a community, we buy it in a good market that has a high demand for affordable housing. Essentially, we don't have to worry about someone buying a tract of land down the road and building another mobile home community. And so we've got a massive barrier to entry. In addition to that, I'll just try to rattle off a few of the big benefits that really piqued my interest initially, and that ultimately are the things that have kept me in this business. The turnover rate of our residents, being that they own the homes, is far less than that of in an apartment complex. Our normal community, it's a neighborhood. They own the home. They rent the land from us. It's very expensive to move these mobile homes. And so it's not as easy as it might be in an apartment complex where your resident decides that they don't want to renew their lease at the end of 12 months, or maybe even better, they decide 6 months into a 12-month lease they don't want to continue on. Mm-hmm. They can very quickly pack up their things. They rent a $20 U-Haul truck, and within a few hours, all their belongings are out. Well, in a mobile home park's a little different. That mobile home, you can't just hitch it up to the back of a Suburban or a pickup truck and drive it away. it's a little bit more elaborate of a move than that, and it costs about $5,000 to $6,000 to do so. And so our resident base is very stable. We've got some residents in our communities that have been there 30 plus years. Again, very similar to that of a stick-built neighborhood. You've got some people that come and go, but mostly people stay for quite some time. In addition to that, the maintenance and upkeep is much less significant because we're not maintaining ACs, roofs, plumbing, or any of that kind of stuff. We are maintaining the infrastructure, so most of the time we do own the sewer lines and the water lines that run throughout the park. We own the roads and the common areas, but that's very minimal. We're not getting calls in the middle of the night when the plumbing goes out or when someone's AC breaks or something like that. They're calling the vendor themselves, and we're not getting involved in it. So just a litany of reasons why we just really, really like the space. And I'll give you one last one that I think is huge. Everyone that's listening to this show should be aware that there is a massive affordable housing shortage in this country, and it's forever growing. We're surely not even putting a dent in it. Mobile home parks are by far the most affordable type of housing to live in. It doesn't mean that they're the lowest quality either. And in fact, most of our communities are the equivalent of a B-grade apartment complex in any type of suburban market. So some of them are actually equivalent to an A-class. I mean, we've got some very nice communities. And in any one of the markets that you could find our communities in, if you looked at the lot rent that the folks are paying to live there, there is no cheaper place that they can possibly live in that given marketplace. You can pick any market that we own a park in. There's no cheaper place they can live. And so what that means is that you can do just about anything. If you lost your job, your husband or wife left you, whatever happens that's catastrophic financially for you in any given month, if your lot rent's $300 a month, most people in this world can figure out a way in 30 days to make $300 to pay their lot rent. That might not be the case if their apartment, rent is $1,000 a month, right? Yep. You can go to CVS and buy a case of water for $4 and sell each bottle for $1, and walk with a $20 profit, right? And you could quickly make $300. And so, I guess what I'm getting at there is our turnover is very low, and we really benefit from the trickle down effect, meaning that if folks need to downgrade from a class to a B class or C class, if they need to find a more affordable place to live, we're at the bottom of that realm. We're not the lowest quality, but we surely are the cheapest. And so it's a good place to be when there's a huge demand for affordable housing.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you're comparable for some of the parks anyway to a B class. How does the stigma? Because I know even if I was going to go raise money, if I start telling people I was going to do it in a mobile home parks, there's a stigma to the whole thing, right?
Yeah, the good thing is that stigma is starting to go away, and I like to compare it to this. Whether you're a single-family home investor or you're an apartment investor, you can pick any city that any of the listeners are in today, and you can find a really rough stick-built home neighborhood, one that's really scary to go into. You can find an incredibly nice one where all the white-collar folks living in. You find the in-between, right, the middle ground, the blue-collar folks. Same thing goes with apartment complexes. You can find the really rough ones. You can find the really nice ones. You can find everything in between. And really the same goes with mobile home parks. You've got some really nice high-end mobile home communities that we like to call lifestyle communities. We have got a lot of those down here in Florida where it's not affordable living. It's a second home. It's a lifestyle. Folks live in these communities because there's activities. There's 3 swimming pools. There's palm tree lined streets. There's golf carts driving around. That's a choice. That's not affordable living. And then you got the other end of that spectrum, which are trailer parks. These are kind of the wrong side of the tracks. Hotel dweller, motel dweller type folks. Weekly rentals. Just not. You can make money doing that stuff. It's a very transient crowd, not our cup of tea. And then you kind of got everything in the middle. We got the folks that are just good, hardworking people that really want the best for their kids. They want to live in a safe, clean and quiet environment. That's who we cater to. And so, we sometimes we might buy a park that has a negative stigma attached to it, but it's in a great market. We know that if we can get out the bad, there's plenty of good waiting to come in there that are looking for a great place for their family. So again, the negative stigma is out there. It has not been a challenge for us to overcome that, because ultimately, just because it's a mobile home park doesn't mean that it can't be a thriving community, a place that is people take pride in and people are proud to live within. So that's really what we cater to.
And you mentioned that like a lot of the utilities and stuff are held by the tenant because they own the property. So if something broke or whatever, what things are you in charge of?
Yeah, so basically the water and sewer lines throughout the park, are the water lines, most of the time we own the water line going up until the actual water meter itself that leads into their home. And so if anything happened on our side of that water meter, it'd be our responsibility. If it happens on the other side of the water meter, it's their responsibility. The same goes for the most part with the sewer line. The same goes with the electrical pedestal. Basically, we own it all the way up to the pedestal itself. Anything after the pedestal going into the home is the tenant's responsibility. So the roads throughout the parks, most of the time, we maintain the roads. We do have a few communities where maybe one of the main roads is owned by the town or the city, and they maintain it, which is always a nice little bonus. And then, most of the time we do not own the gas lines. I know there are some older parks that are built out west, maybe like Arizona and Nevada, to where, the gas lines might be actually owned by the actual park owner, where most of the communities that we own, we don't have any to where we own the gas lines. The gas lines are one of those things that you don't want to own that infrastructure. You just don't want to deal with it. The gas company owns it. They maintain it. And so that's it. I mean, common areas we mow. For the most part, we're the ones that are in charge of mowing the common areas. In a few of our parks, we do mow the entire community, meaning like it's kind of just built into their rent. Okay. And a lot of that really depends on how the park was being operated before we took it over. Like, we don't fix what isn't broken. If that was already the expectation, the residents are living there, they love the fact that the community actually mows their grass and takes care of it. We just build it into the rent and we keep it that way. That way we don't, rock the boat. And then in addition to that, with the grass thing, it actually looks better when everyone gets their grass cut in the same day than, Bobby over here only mows his once every 3 weeks. And, Mary actually keeps an impeccable lawn. She mows hers once a week and pulls the weeds. So it's nice when it's nice and consistent across the board. So,
yeah. So when you're shopping for these parks, I know you mentioned like the gas lines might be something you may not want to own. Is there any other red flags or stuff you'd want to avoid?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the big things I think that is the big gotcha in this niche is the utility aspect, and that's more so private utilities. What we kind of just talked about there was more public utilities, like the water and sewers provided by the municipality or a similar entity. But there's a lot of communities that are in more rural environments. It doesn't mean they're out in the middle of nowhere, but it means that they're far enough on the outskirts of town that they don't have access to municipal utilities. Sometimes they don't have access to neither sewer or water. Some they have one and not the other. But in any event, the sewer side of it is a pretty big deal. You'll see different types of infrastructure, such as septic systems, what's known as a wastewater treatment plant, which is basically just a miniature version of the treatment plant that where you live, Glenn. That how they treat the sewage. Yep. And then there's other types of plants like that as well. But there's a lot of there can be a lot of liability with those. There can be a lot of capital expenditure associated with them if you don't do your due diligence. All those types of systems do have a typical life expectancy. And if you're at the tail end of that and you haven't budgeted for doing major improvements or replacements, I've seen those things really bite people in the rear end to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes nearing $1 million. It's okay if you budget for it. It's okay if you know what you're getting yourself into. We have a park right now in contract. It's got a failing sewer infrastructure, and we know it. It's probably a $700,000 repair. It's major. And it's not even just that. It's a timing issue. It takes literally nearly a year to get the permitting to get it done. And so we basically our agreement with the park owners, we're not closing on that darn thing, and we're not even letting our money go hard until we have that permit in hand. So we'll on the flip side, we'll spend the money going through that process of engineering, but I'm not buying into the liability. I'm not buying into the Department of Environmental Quality breathing down my neck and the state coming after me for what you've neglected to repair of the last 4 years. And so, but we know what we're getting ourselves into, and we budgeted the cost into it, and basically done as much as we can to mitigate the risk. And on the flip side, once we get through it, it will be a huge opportunity because we're picking it up at a great price to essentially take on the major heavy lifting that's going to take place. So, in any event, and then on the water side, the well is another risk. That's if you don't have access to municipal water. Wells aren't that big of a deal. They've been around, forever. All right, you're just digging into an aquifer. But sewage, you can't really poison anybody unless someone's out there drinking sewage. But you surely,
I hope not.
you surely can poison someone with water, right? I mean, they're drinking it, and so it's a big liability. You got to make sure that you've got a licensed operator managing your system, making sure that they're doing the state required testing on a regular basis, and And if they haven't been, or if the equipment's not up to speed and it's not removing certain types of minerals that might be in excess, then you've got a liability in your hands. So it's not something that should scare anyone away. They just need to do additional due diligence to make sure that they're covering their butt, basically.
Yeah. And for this type of product, is financing more difficult?
It can be. It's kind of like it's very similar to I'd say apartments in a way, in that it depends on how it's been run, the size of it, how good the books have been kept by the current owner. And so if you got a situation where the books are impeccable, the collections are phenomenal, they've got QuickBooks in place, and they've been doing their job maintaining books and enforcing collections and evictions and things like that, then they're not all that challenging to get financed. But more commonly than not, we were and have been very much a mom and pop industry for many years. That's changing over time. I'd say it's very often that we get rent rolls that are still handwritten rent rolls, and literally profit and loss statements on green sheets, which is very antiquated. It's very challenging to get financing when that's how the books have been kept for many years. And then in addition to that, you'll find owners that collect cash from tenants, and so it can be. But if it's a well-run community, like the stuff we own, it's all stable. We've owned it for a while. For us to go get a refinance or to sell it to another buyer that's qualified is not an issue to get financing.
I wasn't even going to tackle this, but now you mentioned refinance. So is there certain, value adds that you can do to a park to bring its value up?
Yeah, there's a ton. As with any other type of real estate, we look for things like, for example, if the rents haven't been kept up to market, meaning that the market rents are. In fact, I just had Michelle here, who works with me, had her do some comps on a park that we're looking at. They're currently at $290 a month. I knew the market was higher. I didn't know how much, so I had her call around today. She called 5 different communities, and what I found is that all the communities range as high as $472 a month, and the lowest one I think is $410. And what that tells me is that the 290, this other one, is incredibly low. There's a lot of upside there. There's essentially probably $100 of easy upside, and it's a 150 space park. And so you can do some quick math there real quick, Glenn. So what is that? $100 times 150 equals times 12. That's an additional $180,000 of net revenue to your bottom line. And on a capitalization rate,
cap rate,
you could do, you can figure out real quick what that, a couple $1 million pretty quickly could be added to that community by raising the rent. So that's very easy, low hanging fruit. Some other things that we do is, we've seen many instances where, being that these are mom and pop run, they're not very efficient with their payroll. They might have folks working for them that aren't doing a great job. They're just kind of sucking up time, not really getting any work completed. We'll go in and kind of thin out payroll and make sure that we have just the necessary folks working for us that we need. Sometimes we've seen managers where they should be making probably like $15, $20 an hour. They're getting paid $100,000 a year to run a park, and just things like that. So we can go in and operationally fix that pretty quickly. Collections issues we can fix. There's a lot of upside there. When they're not enforcing collections, like no pay, no stay is us. I mean, if you don't pay by after the grace period, we start the process. When you get lenient on that, it gets out of control pretty quickly. So we can fix that. And then one of the other big upsides is the water itself. A lot of older parks were built to where 50 years ago, water wasn't a really significant expense. And so a lot of times park owners that was included in your rent. You got free water. Well, we know when you don't have to pay for it, typically people overuse it and abuse it. And so a lot of times we'll go in, we'll see, a water bill that is typically about 3 times the amount, given the amount of residents that live there. It should be 2/3 less than what it is. Yep. And we'll go put meters in, and we'll bill them back accordingly for their usage. And we'll find very quickly that the usage goes down by 60-70%. And in addition to that, we get to that savings comes directly off our expense line item and goes to our bottom line. So it's a very nice thing. And then lastly, a lot of parks you'll find have vacant lots, meaning that it could be a 100-lot park. There's only 80 homes that are in there. There's another 20 lots that are infrastructure's there. They're ready to go. So we'll go buy homes. We'll go buy either used or new mobile homes, bring them in and sell them to new residents. So that's
awesome.
just some of the good ways that we can add a lot of value to communities.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. Before you go, how about you tell us about where people can find you, your podcast, all your stuff, anyway.
Yeah. There's a couple different ways you can find me. As Glenn had mentioned, we do host 2 weekly podcasts. One's called Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow, so you can go find that on iTunes, Stitcher, and all the other different Google Play, SoundCloud.
So actually, there's a picture of it in your background if you're watching this on YouTube.
Yeah, there you go. I got a picture of both of them. So
yeah.
And then my other podcast is the Mobile Home Park Investing Podcast, which that one is obviously it's about mobile home park investing. My other show is actually about commercial real estate investing. So we kind of run the gamut on different asset types and commercial real estate. And then my personal website's kevinbupp.com. You can find me there. And then our company, which you can see behind me as well, our investment arm of our company is Sunrise Capital Investors, and that website, sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. So there's 4 different ways you can find me. I'm not too hard to track down. One of those 4 ways that you'll be able to reach me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
Glenn, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks.